Hello, and welcome to the podcast, Equipped to March, with WVU Chi Alpha. The hope of this podcast is to equip small groups with sound biblical teachings on God and how to walk with Him, and to equip the small group leader with the tools to lead as God has called them. We pray you are equipped and encouraged by this podcast in order that you can march well for our King on the college campus. Now, please welcome our hosts.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. I am the guest, Jeff. This is the star of the show.
Yeah.
Christopher.
I'm Christopher, not the star of the show.
Star of the show is on
One of the hosts.
You are the star. I am the host.
Sure, I'm the star.
Charles Sombrio.
Host, Charles Sombrio. Star, Christopher Mancius.
I'm a
Guest.
star.
Yes, Jeffrey.
Jeffrey. No last name. So for the past few weeks, we've been talking about devotional life, and this will be our last week talking about it, and we will be talking about worship today.
Yeah. Cool. So,
Why are you here?
Funny you ask, because I was asked, first off. But I don't play any instruments, which...
you don't?
Nope, not a single one. Oh. I have instruments in my home, but they're just for show. Yes, but I don't actually play any instruments, but Charles and Christopher both are musically inclined.
You could say that.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. Some would say. Some would say that you don't have any talent.
So you can't lead worship because you don't play any instruments?
I can't lead worship at a church or a Chi Alpha service. I can lead worship in my house or wherever I am.
Hold on. So what is worship?
What is worship? That's a good question.
I'll go ahead and answer it. Worship is, put simply, to attribute worth to something. It is when you give something value, whether or not it has value already, or regardless of the value of the thing already, right? It's when we, in our hearts and our minds, by our words, our actions, we say, I give worth to this thing. And so when we worship, primarily, we've been joking about it in church, what we're doing through song is saying, you're worthy of it all. Lyrics to a worship song that you might have sung in church, right? And we're declaring God's worth above everything else. And so, that's how we do it through song. That's, I think, the primary way, that we think people worship, and it probably is in a Christian context. But you don't have to be a Christian to worship something or someone.
Amen.
And because I think the Bible shows that how by being made a creature by God, we were made for relationship with Him and therefore to worship God. But we can choose to worship other things or other people.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's kind of dangerous. And I think we see it a lot. But worship, I think, is just to give worth to something. Yeah,
that's cool. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, whenever I think of the word worship, a Bible verse always comes to my mind. It's John 4:23 or 24. I'm not actually sure. I think it's kind of both. But he says God is spirit, and true worshipers worship in spirit and in truth. So whenever I think about that, I just think, okay, I can worship God not by singing a song. It doesn't have to be. That's just the primary way that we think of worship in a context, like you said.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that I can only worship through this one way.
Yeah.
And I mean, people in the New Testament and the Old Testament, they didn't just worship by singing songs.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you think you are putting God in a box, if you're like, okay, well, this is the only way I can worship someone, and it kind of holds you back from doing other things.
Yeah.
And considering it worship. Like I said, I don't have any musical ability. I can't play an instrument. I can't sing well. That doesn't mean that I don't have the ability to worship, because that would kind of be like, okay, well, you can only worship me if you have a good voice or if you can play a music instrument. And that would kind of be like, okay, well, only the elite get to worship, or you have to learn how to play an instrument to worship me, which is absurd. The elite, yeah.
Yeah, which is like really cool, because if what you said is true, God created us to worship, then either he made a big mistake and didn't create you with any musical ability, and a lot of people with any musical ability, or maybe worship is not just music, like you're saying. And I think that's like a huge deal. I don't think it's wrong for us to think about music whenever we think about worship.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's a great thing. And there's something, I believe there's something in our spirit that responds to music in a specific way, that can be worshipful, that maybe something else isn't. But it is limiting, and I don't think God made a mistake. And so if that's true, then we can worship God in other ways.
Yeah.
And so it's like ascribing worth. Something I've been thinking about a lot is just worship. Yeah, anyways, we'll kind of get to it roundabout, but like we were talking about what was last week. What do they call it? The Spotify Wrapped. Whatever. It's like so funny.
I loved it.
I think it's funny. I don't care.
I loved it.
I did not love mine.
Okay, but so some things we were saying when we were driving around the other day talking about this Spotify thing was like, yeah, just kind of like, okay, how do I use this tool, which is entertainment? Spotify is an entertainment tool. Yeah. How do I use it to glorify God? And if I'm using it for any other way, then I'm kind of putting my worship in something that doesn't deserve it. And you said something that was really good, and I really haven't stopped being able to think about it, but we were talking about whatever someone's top artist is, right? Like whether it's Kanye, whether it's Taylor Swift, whether it's Lil Uzi Vert, whether it's Brockhampton, whether it's Bethel, whether it's Hillsong, whether it's whatever. The reason you're listening to that isn't necessarily just because you like the sound of it. But Christopher, you said something and it blew my mind. The reason you're listening to that, the reason that person is your number one artist, whether it's worship music, godly Christian music, or whether it's just horrific, scary metal music or something like that that's singing about violence. Like, what the reason you're listening to that is because your appetite is for whatever that is.
Right.
And so Spotify Wrapped, to me, is funny because it's a great revealer of what I have hungered for the last year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's Bethel, that's cool. But that also shows that I was hungry for Jesus.
Yeah.
And if it's, I don't know, Taylor Swift, then that means I was hungry for the feels, or like man-hating, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, Broken Heart feels nice to me. Mm-hmm. And you can listen to that stuff. I mean, that's fun, like road trip stuff to me. Like, I'm not just worship, hands up, worship music only constantly. If music's on, Christmas music's fun, whatever to me. But what is my appetite for? Is my appetite for fun, for my emotions, or is my appetite for Jesus? And I think for me, when we talk about worship, you talk about ascribing, you talked about like not putting God in like a box. To me, it really is like appetite. And I've seen that play out in different ways in my life. That have sometimes been really encouraging because I am hungry for God. But especially in the past, like, there have been times in my life where it's been incredibly discouraging, to be honest, but also convicting and revealing of what my appetite has been for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, like a good way to like think about just like what you're talking about for like, why why Taylor Swift or Bethel
Right.
might be at the top of your Wrapped list,
Yeah.
or just whatever you spend the most time on, whatever
Yes.
you think about most, or whatever you like talk about most. Those things reveal what you value, and therefore they reveal what you've given worth to in your life.
Right.
And so if you just like think about those three questions and like the answers to them,
That's good.
and that's why like this Wrapped thing with Spotify reveals that
Yes.
is because you spent that much time listening to whatever artist, which means you spent that much time thinking about whatever their
Days.
lyrics were saying.
Days of your life, yes.
Yeah, and then that means you spent probably that much time, if you talk about what you love, which everyone usually
Right.
does, talking about the lyrics in the song, or talking about other things that you thought about because this song made you think about it. I mean, like the weight of like what we listen to. I'm just talking about Spotify right now. You know, like has a huge influence on our thought life and what we think about the world. And those things can reinforce or build or break down good, bad, whatever ideas, which will ultimately direct like where our lives go. And so just kind of put that simply, like, yeah, I know that you guys believe this, that like we become like what or who we worship.
Yes.
And so that's pretty crazy. If it's the Lord, thank you, Jesus. But if it's anything else, then that's pretty scary.
And like whenever you're talking about appetite, and just like kind of what we kind of color our lives with, like when it comes to music, I think that worship isn't necessarily like, we're kind of moving away from this idea that worship is just music.
Yes, yeah.
But like worship is truly an attitude. Like whenever I think about it, I'm like, okay, like I don't have to put on a Hillsong song or a Bethel song to worship the Lord, because like if I truly take this verse to heart, you know, John 4:24, then it can't just be music. Like if spirit and truth is only in music, then I mean that kind of sucks. Like if you want to tell someone, you know, something good about them, but you want it to be true, you got to sing it to them.
And there's no like Greek translation that's like actually worshipers worship the Father with music.
And I mean that is a way that we do it, but it isn't just music. So
that's right.
Thinking about that and thinking like it is truly an attitude, like worship can become anything. I was the other day I was listening to this band called Under Oath, which is it used to be one of my favorite bands. And there was this lyric that they had, and they're not a worship song, they're a heavy metal band, in case you didn't know. But like the lyrics,
not scary though.
Not scary metal. But the lyrics, like whenever I was listening to the song, I was like, I feel closer to Jesus in this moment than sometimes when I'm in a church service.
That's cool.
Worshiping, like in a worship setting. Put all the quotes you want on that. What doesn't matter. But like and the reason that was true is because the lyrics that I was singing, well, I was kind of in public, so I wasn't singing super loud, but like what I was listening to was more true for me in that moment than some of the songs that I sing at a Chi Alpha service or at, you know, a church service. Not saying that the songs are bad, but those lyrics, what I was singing, like were true for me in that moment. And it doesn't just apply to like a song that I'm singing, but truly anything I do, if it's done in spirit and truth, that is worship. And yeah, it can relate to anything. It doesn't have to be just songs. But that's the easiest way for us to be like, oh, hey, I can wrap my mind around another song that isn't a worship song being worship, just because we've attributed the two together so often.
I think a way to tell if something is like worshipful, like to the Lord, is to like examine what happens like to my view of God during that activity or whatever. Because if my view of God elevates when I'm listening to under oath, or if your view of God elevates when you're listening to that under oath song, then that's worship.
That's right.
That's worshiping God, and that's pretty awesome and crazy, because it's not actually about like even going back to like worshiping in church. Just because I'm like singing words that were written originally to give God glory, that doesn't mean that. You said attitude, like the posture of my heart is kind of like the way that I think of it. I can literally go through a 20-minute church service worship time and not worship a single second, because my heart wasn't directed to the Lord. I might be thinking about what the drummer is doing. I play drums. I might be thinking about the lights, or looking around at other people. And I can be singing the whole time, because I know like the lyrics to say all the songs. But like, that doesn't mean that I actually worshipped God. Like worship is like when my heart and my mind and my eyes are directed towards Jesus. Yeah, that's really And I'm good. Saying, you're worthy, you deserve everything. And that, in order for it to be true worship in church, that actually needs to happen. Right. But that can also, therefore, happen outside of church. And I think one verse that came to mind when I was thinking about worship was Romans 12:1, and in it it says to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to the Lord. And I think just kind of in other words, offer your life in service, like as worship to God, and so like when. If that's what that means in other places in the Bible where it says stuff like that, like 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, whatever you do, like do it for like the glory of God, then that means when I play soccer, I can actually like give the Lord glory through like playing soccer or working out. Actually, sometimes when I'm working out, I'm like trying to lift whatever weight. Usually this is like within like in a gym, not so much other context working out, but like, I'll be like doing this like bench press and I'm like thinking about like, okay, I need to breathe in order for my arms to have oxygen, and I'm thinking like, holy cow, like the Lord is so crazy, like making my body function to where I can lift this like 600-pound, bench press.
No.
More like 30. I'm just kidding. I haven't bench pressed in a while, so it's probably very low.
Not 600.
You've never done. Yeah. Let's clarify. Never 600, not bench pressed anything in a while.
That's right.
Okay.
But
that makes
just
sense.
making sure.
Yeah. But I'm thinking like
a little lost, but fair.
But you can do all things.
It's like a worshipful experience, because I'm like, this is crazy. Like the Lord, like the way He made the human body is so amazing. Yes. Or if I get a cut and I'm thinking, this thing will heal on its own. The Lord created that. Like that is my view of God is elevated.
Yeah, right.
Like during those kind of things. And so, I don't know. Like, I know you guys have like other stuff like that. Like, what about for y'all?
I was thinking when you were saying that, like something that is like incredibly worshipful for me is to watch like Planet Earth, and just seeing like creation. I mean, West Virginia actually is a beautiful state, and so like going hiking and all that stuff is worshipful. I don't know. There's just something about like watching Planet Earth that it's just like, this is God's creation, and it didn't take Him much work to do it. Like He did this, and it's cool when you said that, because basically I think that both of these ideas is a great example of spirit and truth, because I think I could maybe get like lost in, oh my gosh, this is so crazy, and that is worshiping God in spirit. But He said true worshipers worship the Father in spirit and truth. And because I know who God is, I can worship God through nature, through science, in a way that someone who doesn't know God, they actually might worship science in spirit. And if they think, oh wow, this is crazy, what an amazing way this all just happened, and however I believe this happened, this makes me feel something. And so I'm going to respond to that. And that is worship.
Yeah.
But spirit and truth is knowing who God is, understanding that all science points to God because he made it, and thinking if he can make this, he's pretty amazing. Yeah. And then continuing with that thought and continue with that, and also that feeling, but it has to be both. Yeah. And I think sometimes we want to worship God with truth.
Right.
Oh, I read the Bible. I didn't really get anything out of it, but it was definitely worshipful. Or even going to church, worshiping, singing a song. Like we were saying, your mind might be 1,000 miles away. And you're saying all these things that are very true, but your spirit's not in it. Yeah. And I think that this combination of spirit and truth is such a big deal, because not only do we know who God is, but we're spirit. Yeah. C.S. Lewis says we're half spirit, half animal. and it's a cool thought. Like if I'm spirit, then I have the ability to respond to God emotionally. If I'm animal, whatever, then I have the ability to respond to God with my mind. Yeah. And that to me is like so profound, but also what a simple verse to say, true worshipers worship the Father in spirit and truth. You can just spit it out. Yeah. But that is such a big deal to who we are, especially if we become like what we worship. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like we're not talking about just going out and doing things that we enjoy because we enjoy them and because it makes us feel good, and like it's not like worship
equals happy.
Yeah. Or enjoyment or whatever. It's I think the things that we enjoy doing, we can make an easy switch between doing them because I enjoy them and doing something I enjoy for the Lord.
That's right.
Because at that point, we're not doing them because we enjoy them. We're doing something that the Lord has like gifted us with, this passion, this hobby, whatever, and we're like giving it like as an offering, like to the Lord. Like, this is yours. Thank you so much. Like, you're worthy. Yes. You're so great for like giving this thing to me, or you know, and whatever. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I think just if we can start doing the things that we enjoy for the Lord, then that's like a good first step, like towards worship. Absolutely. And it might actually change the things that you do and enjoy, because if you don't think that you can give glory to the Lord with some of the things that you're doing, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. That's right. And so, but yeah, like, another thing I was thinking about was just like, why Jesus? Yeah. You know, like, that's, I feel like, an important question to answer, because if we can worship anything or anyone, and everyone does worship something or someone to some capacity, then like, what makes Jesus so great? Like, to where he like deserves our worship. What do you guys think?
I mean, it's a phrase that I've heard a lot since I've been in Chi Alpha, just because like certain phrases, they just get repeated, but they stick, because that's why they're repeated, so that you understand it. That's right. And whenever I was in college, you better believe it took a lot to get something through to me. But basically, basically it was just, I don't know the phrase exactly, but it doesn't matter. But he is the only one worthy that can bear the weight of my worship. Yeah. And honestly, thinking about it, it's true. Like, thinking about it in any other context, like, I can worship, you know, one of those books on that bookshelf. Like, I mean, they're about Jesus, but if I worship that book instead of who the book's about, first of all, it's just pages. Like, it's gonna let me down. Right. It doesn't have complete truth. It doesn't have like any absolute, like, this is like, you know, the definitive words about the word. That's what the book's called. Sorry, but it's not complete. There's no like, I'm still going to be wanting after I read the book.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
if the book can worship and I can worship, but I can't worship the book because it is pointing to something that is complete, and I am looking for that. And it could be anything. It could be I could worship, video games.
Yeah.
Or a musician.
Or a musician,
Right.
yeah.
Or an athlete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a person. Like, they aren't going to hold up
Yes.
to what I need. Like, eventually they're going to let me down, and I'm going to be obviously let down because there's not enough.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's not big enough.
Yes.
They're not big
Yeah,
enough.
it's not.
They have an image of God, which may be what I'm worshiping, but they are not the complete thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you
gotta
look
be-
at a lot of the famous people, especially like actors and like music artists, and they get weird.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
They start off okay,
Yeah.
maybe you
Weird
don't
as
see
heck.
that part because you don't listen to them until they're big.
Right.
But after time and time again of people saying, Justin Bieber, you're so great. He
Yes.
started as a normal kid.
Yeah.
And
Small
then,
town dude. Yeah.
and thankfully he's like come back around.
Yeah.
But he was like super weird for
Yeah,
a
yeah,
while.
yeah.
And I think a lot of that is because he couldn't bear the weight of people's
Yes,
worship.
man.
He was lifted up, he was praised,
Yes.
he was put on a pedestal, and that just does something to people.
Yeah.
And because we weren't made to be worshipped,
Right.
we were made to worship.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's a great point, because I think outwardly it might look the same. Like, we talk about honor, we talk about encouraging and all these things, and so, man, I'm not, if I'm like honoring you and saying like, hey, I saw this in you, blah 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 blah, I'm not attributing that characteristic to you. I'm attributing it to Jesus in you, and I'm actually giving you worth because I'm worshiping the one who I see in you. And so when I say,
That's good.
you are being incredibly generous, I'm actually worshiping God because I know who he is. And I think, we talked about a couple weeks ago, but like the foundation for any relationship that we have with Jesus is knowing what the Bible says. But I think we could even worship the Bible. If, like you said, you said a book about God, the only book that I know that's most about God is the Bible. If I don't
66 books,
look at it, yeah, that's right, the library. If I don't look at the Bible as a means to knowing Jesus and having a relationship with him and obeying him, then I'm just worshiping in truth again.
Yeah.
And I'm not worshiping in a full way, in a true way. I don't know. The only alternative to true I know is false. And so, I don't know. I've never really thought about that before. But I think it does. I think it makes others weird. And the truth of it is, it's not just athletes or actors or famous people. We have friends who, worship the idea of marriage, who worship the idea of a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And so when they get that, they worship them, and it's not good. It's really ugly. And, yeah. Anyways, that's like really heavy, but that's really the alternative to worshiping Jesus is like really, really difficult things. And I was reading this morning in Jeremiah chapter 44, and it was really cool. Well, sad story. Everyone stops worshiping God in Judah. And then God says this, and it kind of hit me. He says in verse 7, "Why do you commit this great evil against yourselves?" Why do you commit this great evil against yourselves? They're sinning against God, but they're committing a great evil against themselves. And so I think what happens is, when we don't worship Jesus in spirit and truth, we hurt God ultimately, first and foremost, most importantly, weighted most, right? We also hurt that person really, really bad. Justin Bieber's fans made him weird for a good time, made him dangerous. He drove cars like too fast, like all these crazy things. But then we also hurt ourselves. And so if any of those things matter to you, worship Jesus.
Yeah.
Because he is the only one who is able, like you said, to bear the weight of my worship. He's the only one who can bear the weight for himself, for others, and for me. And I think that is like incredibly important. It's not just his strength. It's his holiness. It's his goodness. It's his, there's no one else. There's no other option. And if we choose another option, if we choose another God, if we choose another thing, if we choose another relationship or ideal, then we are breaking God's heart. We're going to tear that thing apart, and we're going to tear ourselves apart. Yeah. And yeah.
Well, yeah, like, and you know, I think just like our definition for love is unselfishly choosing for the highest good of God and his kingdom.
Right.
God does that too. God chooses unselfishly for his highest good and his kingdom. And you might say, oh, well, that's selfish, that's arrogant, that's prideful.
Right.
Well, that's not true because it's only prideful, like, accept God, because God is the greatest. He is.
Yeah, that's right.
He's
like him doing his best for him is doing his best for you.
Is unselfish.
Right.
It's so cool.
And
it's
so,
helping everyone. It's a win-win.
Yeah, and just going back to like week 1, we talked about intrinsic value.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is like, that's a great reason why Jesus is most worthy of our worship, because of his beauty, his unselfishness, his intrinsic character qualities, of loving, kind, just, merciful. I mean, just so many times when thinking about like the Lord, I'll like think back to the Old Testament. And like God as Father, man, he's gone through so much. He's so patient, so merciful, and ultimately so loving. Because if you read the Old Testament and then the New Testament, and then fast forward 2,000 years to where we're at now, that's 6,000 plus years where the Lord has been so steadfast and faithful and patient with mankind, having to punish, having to let people choose for themselves sometimes, so that hopefully they can see that they're being stupid and like worship him and change their ways. And so like, yeah, I mean, that's just something for me that like as I see who God is, that's like giving glory to him. But also I'm a worship leader when I'm telling other people about that. Like I kind of just led worship because the hope from saying that stuff about who God is was that others, you guys, anyone watching would think more highly about God.
Yeah, that's right.
And so
that's so cool, man.
So yeah, just kind of like going along with that, like, I mean, the Bible being the primary way we see who God is and what he wants and why he's most worthy. But then like asking our friends, like ask your small group leader, ask your friends, ask God's friends, people who love Jesus, value him, worship him, what they think about God, and your idea of God will grow. And in that moment, that can be worship.
It's so cool.
And so, yeah, just with like the things that we've been talking about today, step 1 to worship is just see what you do. Try and like do these things for the Lord. Kind of motive part 2 in a way. But see where you can give value to God, and give him worth. And then that's kind of like where worship starts. Maybe where it ends too. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But that's it. We're out of time. So,
Merry Christmas.
This was our last podcast for fall semester 2020. Hopefully 2021 comes. And we'll see you guys in the spring. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
That was great.
You're welcome. Thank
Always
you for being on the podcast with me as the guest.
So make sure you look at the discussion questions too. Like and subscribe. Go worship Jesus.
Amen. Bye.
Adios.